The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees, which is a level of precision that actually exceeds the alignment of the Meridian building at the Greenwich Observatory. This leads to the central question of how a civilization using copper tools and hemp ropes achieved a geometric perfection that modern satellite surveying equipment struggles to replicate today. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly who built the pyramids according to the data and why the answer provided by artificial intelligence has left both historians and engineers in a state of uncomfortable realization. We are going to answer the title question of who built these structures by looking at what the physical evidence actually allows and what it strictly eliminates. To begin, we must look at the foundation of the structure where the entire 13-acre base is level to within 2.1 centimeters. This is a tolerance that is nearly impossible to achieve over such a massive area without laser levels, yet it is a documented physical reality that anyone can check. The default story we are taught in school is that the Great Pyramid was built as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu over a period of 20 years using a massive labor force of tens of thousands of people. This model is supported by the discovery of worker villages nearby and the Wadi al-Jarf papyrus, which is a logbook from an overseer named Marir that describes moving limestone blocks by boat. When contradictions are pointed out, they are often dismissed as being the result of an almost infinite amount of time and human labor, suggesting that if you throw enough people at a problem, any level of precision becomes possible. However, the first major anchor contradiction is the sheer scale of the removed stone and the missing spoil that should be present if the standard ramp theories are true. If a ramp was used to reach the top of the pyramid, it would have required as much material as the pyramid itself, yet no trace of such a massive secondary structure has ever been found. This is where the uncomfortable revelation begins to take shape as we look at the engineering constraints that the artificial intelligence flagged when it was fed every geological survey and measurement ever recorded. The artificial intelligence looked at the four corners of the pyramid and found they deviate from a perfect 90-degree angle by a maximum of only 12 arcseconds. In simple terms, an arcsecond is a 65th of a degree, meaning the geometric precision here is at a sub-millimeter level across hundreds of feet of stone. A standard explanation cannot account for how this was maintained as the structure rose hundreds of feet into the air without any optical sighting tools or modern mathematics. The significance of this precision is that it rules out the idea of trial and error because a single mistake at the base would have resulted in a twisted or leaning structure that would never meet at a perfect apex. This changes our understanding because it suggests that the builders possessed a method of measurement that we have not yet recovered from the archaeological record. Another layer of this mystery is the joint gaps between the surviving casing stones, which are only 0.5 millimeters wide. This gap is so small that a human hair or a thin razor blade cannot fit between the blocks, yet these blocks weigh several tons each. The mechanism required to place a multi-ton block with half-millimeter precision is not something that can be achieved with simple levers and rollers. Furthermore, these joints were filled with a mortar that is actually stronger than the stones themselves, and its chemical composition has never been successfully duplicated in a modern laboratory. This reality check forces us to ask how a primitive society developed a chemical adhesive that outperforms modern concrete while leaving no record of the formula. The stakes of this finding are high because it implies a lost chemical science that existed alongside the Stone Age tools we find in the dirt. Moving deeper into the structure, we encounter the granite beams in the ceiling of the king's chamber, which weigh up to 80 tons each. These massive slabs were lifted 175 feet into the air and positioned with perfect accuracy to protect the chamber from the weight of the stone above. To understand the logistics, consider that these blocks were quarried in Aswan, which is over 500 miles away from the Giza Plateau.
Scientists found small flakes of bone that had been chipped off the main limb. They were able to take these tiny pieces and fit them back onto the larger bones like a puzzle. This proves that the bones were broken right there on the spot. If a river had washed the bones into that position, the tiny flakes would have been carried away by the water.
This contradiction suggests that the transport technology of the Old Kingdom was either vastly different than what we imagine, or that we are missing a fundamental piece of their industrial toolkit. The artificial intelligence also pointed out the sarcophagus paradox, where the granite chest inside the king's chamber is actually slightly wider than the entrance to the room. This means the object had to be placed there during the construction of the pyramid itself, rather than being moved in later. When you look closely at the interior of this sarcophagus, there are circular tool marks that suggest the use of tubular drills. These drills would have needed to exert immense pressure to cut through solid granite, a feat that is physically impossible for copper tools, which are softer than the stone.
The presence of these tools right where the marrow-rich bones were smashed is a clear sign of intentional behavior. Skeptics have suggested that the heavy machinery used by the highway crew in 1992 might have caused the damage. It is a fair question, as a bulldozer can apply a lot of force. However, the researchers analyzed the way the sediment was packed around the bones.
One of the most shocking revelations discovered through aerial photography is that the Great Pyramid is not actually four-sided, but has 8 sides. The center of each face is slightly concave, a feature that is only visible from the air during the equinoxes, when the light hits the structure at a specific angle. This was not a mistake in construction, but a deliberate engineering choice that increases the structural stability of the pyramid against seismic activity. However, the complexity of carving a slight inward curve into thousands of casing stones so that they all line up perfectly is a task that would require advanced calculus. This changes the narrative from one of simple mass labor to one of extreme mathematical sophistication that we do not see reflected in the surviving papyri of that era.
This kind of weird placement is often seen at sites where humans have processed an animal. It is a small but powerful signal that something other than gravity and water was at work at the Cerruti site. The lack of stone knife marks is often used as an argument against the site being human.
The absence of soot suggests they were using something other than fire, but no remains of mirrors or ancient electrical systems have been found. This creates a logical gap where the process of construction leaves no trace of the environment the workers needed to survive and function. The artificial intelligence noted this as a boundary possibility, where the construction environment itself is a piece of missing evidence. The physical evidence also includes the alignment to the stars of Orion's belt and the understanding of the precession of the equinoxes. This is the 26,000-year cycle caused by the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, which changes the position of the stars over centuries. To align a structure to these patterns, a civilization would need to have kept astronomical records for thousands of years, or possessed a mathematical framework for celestial mechanics. The standard story says the Egyptians were just beginning to develop their calendar during the time of Khufu, which would not provide enough data to account for these long-term cycles. This suggests that the knowledge base used to design the site was much older than the stones themselves, a point that is often ignored because it does not fit the linear timeline of human progress. Geologists like Robert Schoch have added to this uncomfortable revelation by pointing out water erosion patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure. These vertical fissures are typical of heavy, sustained rainfall, which has not occurred on the Giza Plateau for at least 7,000 to 12,000 years. This would date the original carving of the Sphinx to a period long before the Old Kingdom and the reign of Khafra. While mainstream archaeology argues that these patterns are the result of wind and salt crystal expansion, the chemical and physical profile of the weathering more closely matches water runoff. If the Sphinx is thousands of years older than the pyramids, it means the entire site was a multi-generational project that spans across different eras of human history. The artificial intelligence synthesized these points to highlight that neither the mainstream nor the fringe models are fully coherent. The mainstream model has the labor records and the pottery, but cannot explain the sub-millimeter precision or the granite cutting technology. The fringe models can explain the precision by suggesting lost technology, but they often ignore the very real evidence of Egyptian labor and the quarry marks found inside the relieving chambers. The AI concluded that we are looking at a hybrid reality where an existing site of extreme antiquity and precision was likely inherited and worked upon by the dynastic Egyptians. This third position acknowledges the copper tools of the workers, while also acknowledging that those tools could not have created the primary geometric perfection of the base. We must also consider the Great Void, a 30-meter-long hidden chamber detected in 2017 using cosmic ray muon radiography. This chamber sits directly above the Grand Gallery and was never mentioned in any historical text or local legend. The fact that such a massive feature could remain hidden for 4,000 years shows that our mapping of the structure is still incomplete. The logistics of creating a hollow void of that size, deep within a 6 million-ton pile of stone, without it collapsing under the pressure, is an engineering marvel in itself.
The evidence also eliminates the idea that modern construction equipment caused the damage. However, the result still leaves the identity of the people unexplained, as no human DNA or bones were found. The mechanism that is strongest is that an archaic human species, possibly Neanderthals or Denisovans, reached the continent during a warm period, likely by moving along the coast. This interpretation remains open because we still lack a second site to confirm the timing. What we know for certain is that the old model of a 15,000-year arrival cannot explain the marks on these 130,000-year-old bones. This verdict changes how we look at the entire human story. It suggests that our ancestors, or their cousins, were much more adventurous and capable than we ever gave them credit for. It turns the map of the world into a much older and more mysterious place. Instead of a single wave of people entering an empty continent, we have to consider the possibility of many waves, some of which failed and were forgotten by time. The San Diego Mastodon is a reminder that the Earth still holds secrets that can shatter our most basic assumptions. We are left with a sense of reverence for those unknown travelers who stood on the California coast hundreds of millennia ago.
To build the Great Pyramid in 20 years, the workers would have had to quarry, move, and perfectly place one block every 2 minutes, 24 hours a day, for the entire duration. This includes the massive 80-ton granite beams and the white limestone casing stones that were polished to a mirror finish. When you calculate the logistics of the harbor traffic, the ramp construction, and the food supply for the workers, the timeline of 20 years becomes a physical impossibility. The evidence suggests that the construction was either much slower over hundreds of years, or that a technology was used that we have not yet identified. Now we must address the title question directly as promised. Who built the pyramids? The answer provided by the data and synthesized by the artificial intelligence is a verdict of elimination. The scale of the engineering eliminates the idea that the structure was built solely by a Bronze Age society using only the tools found in the archaeological record. The physical evidence of the 0.05-degree alignment, the 12 arc second corners, and the 80-ton granite lifts has no account in the standard model of wooden sleds and copper saws. Therefore, the who remains an open question because the evidence forces us to conclude that the accepted explanation cannot account for the scale of the achievement. We are left with a reality where the work is present, but the worker's tools and methods are entirely missing from the history books. This verdict changes everything for the viewer because it transforms the pyramids from a solved mystery of ancient tombs into a standing proof of a lost level of human capability. It suggests that our ancestors, or a group we have not yet identified, possessed a mastery over physical matter and mathematics that we are only now beginning to rediscover. This realization brings a sense of profound humility and awe as we look at the 6 million tons of stone that have survived for millennia, while our modern buildings struggle to last a century. The Great Pyramid stands as a silent witness to a chapter of human history that has been forgotten or erased, challenging us to look past the simple stories we are told. It is an uncomfortable revelation because it means we are not the first civilization to reach a peak of technical perfection, and it forces us to wonder what else we have lost to the sands of time. The evidence does not give us a name or a face, but it gives us a clear boundary of what is possible,